Okay, so welcome everyone again. Thank you for joining our new webinar on this series about location data in action, where we share with you multiple examples of how to leverage the different types of spatial data that you can find in CARTO's Data Observatory. Today, we will see how the PersonaLive dataset from our partner Spatial.ai can help us gain business insights. And we will see it in a real-world example of a very popular partnership, which is the one between The Gap and Kanye West. My name is Vanessa Lopez, and I'm Data Partnerships Manager here at CARTO. And today I have the pleasure to be joined by Leiden from Spatial.ai, who I'll let introduce himself. Hello, Leiden.
Hey, everyone. Excited to do this.
Good. So this is, if we go to the next slide for our agenda. This is our agenda for today's webinar. First, I'll briefly introduce CARTO's Data Observatory. Then I'll hand it over to Leiden, who will give you an overview of Spatial.ai data and the reason why social media data is so important. After that, he will walk you through the PersonaLive Segmentation System and its use in the Kanye West case study. Finally, we'll have some time to answer your questions, so please use the Q&A panel during the session and we'll try to cover all your questions. And by the way, I really encourage you to stick to the end of the presentation because we've got a special offer for our attendees today. So we think of CARTO as a one-stop shop for our customers where they can solve spatial problems, not only with the finest tools for the analysis, but also with the best data available. Therefore, we have a key piece of our technology, which is the Data Observatory, where you will find more than 10,000 data sets ready to query and up to date. With the Data Observatory, we're actually bridging the gap between data and analysis. So there's no need for your data scientist team to waste time on choosing the data, then licensing it, and finally ETLing. We've done that for you, and it's available in the Data Observatory. If you browse our data catalog, you'll find up to 10 different categories and more than 40 sources, both public and premium. Spatial.ai data is among our premium sources, and as I said, today we're going to take a close look at it with Leiden. So Leiden, if you want to go.
Okay, cool. Well, let's start off with a poll then. So we're going to pull that up. I'll ask you guys, what percentage of the US population do you guess uses at least one source of social media? So that should be pulled up now. We got some options here: 56%, 79%, 44%. Go ahead and start voting. I'd be interested in what we see. All right. Okay, so it looks like the majority, and I don't know if you guys can see this, 88% guess that 79% of the population uses social media. That's an excellent guess. So yeah, if you guess that, you would be correct. 2016 study showed that 79% of the US population uses at least one form of social media data. And this is really the key insight that started Spatial, and that is, if we are missing out on 80% of the population's mindsets, interests, and attitudes, we're missing out on a key piece of the geographic conversation. So we released our first data set within the CARTO Observatory in 2019. And it is the geosocial data set, and that is a categorization of places based on what people are geotagging in Instagram and Twitter and a few other social media sources. And it expands now across 5 countries. We've got the United States, Canada, Mexico, UK, and Australia. But today we're excited to release the PersonaLive data set, which is a categorization of people on the CARTO Data Observatory. And essentially what we're doing with this data set is we're categorizing every household in the United States into one of 80 different segments based off of 3 criteria. One is their social media activity, 2, their retail phone visitation, so what types of brands they show up at, and then 3 is their individual demographic attributes. So this is primarily a segmentation data set, a segmentation at the individual level as well as the geographic level. So let's take a step back and look at what options we have for segmenting our customers and our locations today beyond first-party data. So the first piece is census data, the study of people by their demographics. This is always going to be very important. In the 1970s, we came up with psychographic data, which takes into account some neighborhood effects, as well as applying survey data to people of similar demographics to see potentially how they will attitudinally behave. But the thing that has been missing is the study of people based on what they do. And that is what geosocial data is. And we can really thank Steve Jobs for making this possible. When he popularized the smartphone, he both set a platform for the widespread adoption of social media, as well as created an opportunity to anonymously analyze device movement. More than 80% of people have smartphones in their pocket today, so we can see what types of retail they go to. Both of those data sets play a really big part in the PersonaLive segmentation. But why do a behavior-based segmentation when we can just simply use demographics? I'll show you an example of why this might be important. We're going to look at 2 people through the lens of their demographics in their neighborhood. So person A and person B are both male. They were born in the UK at the same year, both married twice. Both of them live in a castle in a very wealthy neighborhood, and they themselves are very wealthy. So these people would seem indistinguishable based on their demographics and their neighborhood. Person A is Prince Charles, and person B is Ozzy Osbourne, 2 very different people. If we look at them through the lens of their social context, we find a very different story. So we're looking here at Prince Charles' Instagram following. He's following an art museum, BBC News, and British GQ, whereas Ozzy Osbourne is following Road to Recovery, which is an addiction recovery nonprofit, and a few bands. Last week, Prince Charles announced a new kitchen that he launched in a neighborhood and hashtag things like harvest, food waste, and nourish. Whereas last week, Ozzy Osbourne announced a new cryptocurrency that he's releasing called Mutant Bats and used some very different hashtags. Both following and hashtags are really important in our way of distinguishing people within segments. But all of that doesn't matter unless it is statistically more accurate. We did a study on a really good open data set, Iowa liquor sales. So state of Iowa has to report their liquor sales at a location level. And so what we wanted to understand is using demographic, geodemographic segmentation, and PersonaLive segmentation, which is best at reducing the error in predicting the sales at a location. And we found that PersonaLive segmentation reduced the error in predicting sales by 17% versus just looking at demographics alone, and be the leading psychographic segmentation 8 out of 10 times. So including people's behavior is beneficial in predicting the outcome, especially as it relates to sales. We have an internal sales data set, and these results very much match what we see. But let's talk about all the data that pours into this, because that is what is really important and new about the segmentation. It's what makes it statistically stronger. So we have 52 million public profiles that we're looking at. This is social media, what they're hashtagging, what they're saying, as well as what they're following. Mobile device visitation. So we're looking at the people in the block group. Are they visiting Chick-fil-A and then going to Bye Bye Baby, or are they visiting bars at night? That would indicate a very different person. Desktop devices indicates what they are searching on the internet, what they might be interested in, and then individual records gives us an understanding, are they high income, low income, male, female, older, younger, etc. All that data flows into persona segmentation, results in 80 behavioral based segments that while are statistically more rigorous, they're also qualitatively really interesting, and especially their live component is interesting because all the data is flowing into this consistently. So for example, with the social media users, you can see by your customers what types of hashtags are going viral, or what types of products, people, or brands that your customers follow on social media. Mobile device visitation gives you a sense of what types of retail they visit, as well as what type of retail is gaining market share with a given customer. Desktop devices show you what they're researching, and individual records obviously is the demographic component, which is very important. What I'm showing you here is a singular block group. Most geodemographic segmentation systems would take everybody in a block group and say they're generally the same segment. Where we know that's not totally true, and what I'm showing you here is the dots there represent households. The different colors represent different segments, and we can see even if you live next to your neighbor, it doesn't mean you're going to be very similar. In fact, most neighbors are very different from each other, and that's captured in this segmentation. And all of this is available now in the CARTO Observatory at a block group level. So you can go and grab the data set and check it out. There's even a sample data that you can look at. Here, we're showing you household counts at the block group level, also available at the county and zip level as well. And this is what it looks like when you put it on a map. So right here, we're exploring our urban fashion segment. And you can see here, you can see the number of households that fall into that segment, as well as the percentage of households that fall into that segment. Now, what's really exciting, I think, about our partnership with CARTO and about the PersonaLive data set specifically, it's more than just a data set. It's both a data and a platform. And so the data enriches what you are already doing on CARTO today, and the platform extends new functionality beyond the map. So when we say enriches, it could enrich your mobile segmentation if you're using unicast or safegraph, or near data to measure foot traffic to your locations. This gives you an understanding of who is behind those devices. Site selection can help you understand what segments show up in the locations where you're performing well. Geo-marketing is obvious, actually targeting those locations where those segments are. And when we talk about extends, you can actually use that platform. If you have customer data, you can upload the customer data into that and get each of your records appended to their corresponding segment. Once you understand that, you can use that for marketing strategy, and you can even go the next step by actually deploying social media campaigns to the segments that you do well with. For our case study today, I'm mainly going to be focusing on mobile segmentation with Kanye and the Gap, but I'll be hitting on a few of these at the end as well. But we're going to do a demo here of the PersonaLive segmentation. Before I do that, I want to do a poll to see how you guys are mainly using CARTO today, so I can focus on what I think is most important. So what best describes how you're using CARTO? Are you using it to measure foot traffic, site selection, marketing, market analysis, or other? Go for it. All righty, let's see our results. All right, 14% say foot traffic, a lot say site selection, both marketing and market analysis. That's a pretty even split, wow. And then 14% say other, very good. Good. Well, there's a lot of relevance here. Let's do a demo. We'll show you the PersonaLive data set on the platform. So anytime you purchase a data set within CARTO, you also get access to a platform, your own individual platform. This is what it looks like. So here are all of our 80 segments. They range from high income to different life stages to different rurality or urbanicity. But we'll actually just jump into one of these segments to see what we can learn about the people that fall into this segment. So you'll see some things that you might expect from a segmentation here first. They've got a name, the head of household age, the estimated income of the segment, and the total population of the segment. And what you're looking at here is just the overview page. So it gives you sort of a teaser and a taste of the segment, but each of the tabs on the left-hand side allow you to dig even deeper into this and learn more about the segment. So you can see the live social topics. This is what they're talking about right now. So These people are talking about things like fine art photography. They're talking about Patreon. They're talking about the Ukraine invasion right now, loans, and it looks like electric vehicles and drones. So all things are probably interesting. We can look at their live in-store visitation. Here we're seeing that they've had a 36% increase in visiting the YMCA in the past week versus their past 12 months. And we've been seeing, you'll definitely see things like ice cream shops and gyms pop whenever the timing is relevant, and things are starting to get warm, at least here in the US. So that is not surprising to me. So that's live visitation, but you can also look at each segment's visitation over the past year. And this is powered by our data our data partner Near. So these people are really interesting, and that's why they're called family outposts. They really love working on their houses, and they're pretty high income, and they have really nice houses. So you can see they way over index in visiting like True Value Hardware, Williams Sonoma, Home Goods, now in restoration hardware as well. So the way that these scores are represented, 100 is national average. So when you see 200, that means that this segment is twice as likely to show up at restoration hardware, for example. So we can immediately see this segment looks like really influenced by working on their home, as well as they're driven by their kids. We see Learning Express toys here, as well as School of Rock popping up to the top. And we can see the top restaurant visitation. You can see the websites that they're interested in. These people are interested in recreation, and then channel preferences. So if you're going to market to these people, you might want to consider hitting them on their news channels or podcasts, but they're not paying attention to magazines. And then you have a quick demographic snapshot. I'm going to go through a few of these tabs here based on the way that you guys answered that past question on what you guys are using the data for today. But I'm just going to go really high level because you'll notice there is a lot of information here. So our live data can be tracked throughout time. So this is their restaurant visitation throughout time. So if we wanted to see fashion, we see this big bump in January of Dress Barn for whatever reason for this segment. I think that probably is that Coats. It might be Coats in December. You can see the in-store visitation overall. So their number one visiting is Goldfish Swim School versus the average population. If we wanted to see apparel, we can see what they're wearing. Vineyard Vines, Talbots. The grocery visitation, they go to Whole Foods. And you can see they like breweries and they like doing fitness classes together. Brand influence, this is the types of brands that they're following on social media. So they're following Peloton, IBM. If we wanted to see the fashion brands that they're following, it would be Guild.com and ModCloth. Channels, this is how you market to those people. Like I said, they over-index in podcasts, but these are the actual podcasts that they're following on Instagram and Twitter. Pardon My Take, PFT Commenter, Stern Show. And these are their top news preferences. If you're going to make an ad placement, this is a great place to put ads for these people specifically. Social topics, this is what they've been talking about over the past year. So they've been talking about pay it forward, and you can actually see some of those public tweets. Influencers, that's the people they follow. Web visitation, this is the type of interest showing online. And then demographics is all of your basic demographics here. So we see this segment is highly indexes on being Caucasian. It looks like they have kids and they're very high income. So that's an overview of the taxonomy. A lot of ways that you can use this, but we're going to do a real world example. This was a really fun case study to do. So we're going to look at the impact that the Kanye announcement had on Gap's brick and mortar stores. So let me just give you the quick background on this. In July of 2020, Kanye announced his new partnership with the Gap to bring Kanye designed clothing called the YEEZY line to Gap. And on the day of his announcement, Gap's stock price went up by 40%. And Gap really believes that this is going to be a big partnership. They said they believe it's going to be $1 billion brand by 2025. That's not without precedence. The YEEZY brand with Adidas is a $1.7 billion brand. So we're going to look at the impact it had on e-commerce sales And we're also going to see, did that actually affect brick and mortar stores for the segments that follow Kanye? So here's the YEEZY line. The round coat was the first thing that came out. It came out in July 2021, sold out overnight, brought in $7 million, 35,000 orders. And then they released the perfect hoodie in September. And Gap announced that 70% of the customers that bought these hoodies and the coat were brand new to the brand. And they came at a pretty high price point. Kanye was trying to keep the price point low, but that didn't actually end up happening. And what was really interesting is that the announcement for this came 2 months before Gap announced that they are going to close down roughly 1/3 of their stores, 350 stores by 2024. Whereas Athleta and Old Navy, which are both owned by Gap, they are continued to expand. So the implication here is that Gap doesn't have a logistics problem. The Gap brand just has a brand problem. And the question here is this bold partnership with Kanye West a step that Gap is making towards really reinventing their brand? I thought the Financial Times put the question in a really good way. So the YEEZY Gap's first release did really well on e-commerce, but it's unclear whether they're having the halo effect that they intended on the overall Gap brand. And by overall Gap brand, the way that I interpret that is their retail sales, because that makes up more than 90% of their total sales. And for the first time, we're actually able to track if that is true, if people that are following Kanye are actually physically visiting the Gap. So it's the first time that I know that we've been able to take a celebrity announcement online and see how that impacts physical retail. So I'll show you how we did that. The first is we need to understand which segments follow Kanye West. We'll be using PersonaLive dataset to do that. Once we have those segments, we need to understand which stores have those segments in proximity to see if they actually visited the Gap. And we're going to be using CARTO to map our segments to detect the stores that have within a 3-mile radius people that follow Kanye. And then finally, we want to analyze foot traffic of those segments after the announcement to see, did Gap actually bring in people that are following Kanye into their stores after the announcement? So let's look at this. First, we need to determine the segments that follow Kanye. This is really easy to do on the PersonaLive segmentation. All you have to do is you go to the Insight tool. And what the Insight tool allows you to do is it allows you to sort segments by any brand or attribute that you care to know about. So we'll just look at which segments follow Kanye West. We can hit that and we can immediately see Ebony and Essence is the #1 segment, score of 178. That means they're 78% more likely to follow Kanye West, and Urban Fashion, 58% more likely to follow Kanye West. So we have our segments. I will show you this. You can also do a pretty cool thing with a comparison tool where you're comparing on an X and Y axis. Let's say you want to understand people that visit the Gap here in the bottom. So that's, over here, Asian enclaves 3 times as likely as the average person to visit the Gap. And then we can see who follows Kanye West, and we can see that plotted in the XY axis. So we see in the Heights is 37% more likely to follow Kanye and 39% more likely to visit the Gap. But what we want to use here for this is this segment chart. Now we understand which segments follow the Gap or follow Kanye West. So we've got that segment. Now we want to map that to see which gaps have those segments in proximity. And we did this on CARTO. We found that 95 Gap stores have Kanye West following households in a 3-mile radius. That was insightful to me because there's a number of Gap stores that do not even have Kanye followers in proximity to even be able to visit. So I thought that was very interesting. And then the third and final step is analyzing the impact that the announcement had on stores. And the way that we do that is we look at the home block group of the device that visited the store, and we do a weighted distribution of the segments that live in those block groups. So what we're doing is we are connecting the mobile data to the PersonaLive data set. On our platform, we have an automated way of doing this, and all the visitation, as you can see, the lines visiting this gap here, they're different colors because there's different segments. So each of those devices is unique based on the segment that's visiting. Now we've matched the mobile device visitation to the gaps, we can answer 3 key questions that helps us understand what happened after the announcement. So the first one we want to answer is, what was Gap's standard customer set before the announcement? The second is, what happened to all of the segments that follow Kanye after the announcement? And then finally, which segments saw the most lift overall? So let's check that out. So the results here, this is Gap's standard customer set before the announcement. This is their 2019 customer profile. We see Salsa Swagger makes up 4%, for example, of the Gap visits to our 95 stores. So what happened after announcement to these segments? Some of them went up, some of them went down. Overall, their top 10 segments went down by around 2%. To me, that's just a clue that the segmentation changed. Let's look at the Kanye followers and what happened to them after the announcement. Again, we see some went up, some went down. Overall, though, there was overall with these top 10 segments that follow Kanye, a lift in visiting these 95 stores, but it was a slight increase, not a super strong increase. Now let's look at the segments with the greatest change. If you take all 10 of these segments, the month after the announcement had the greatest change is a 3% increase from all these segments. And what was unique to me about all these segments is if you look at their Kanye index, every single one of these segments that had the greatest change, except for one, over index in following Kanye. Again, 100 is average. So we see Soul and Spirit, for example, is 68% more likely to follow Kanye. And then the question really just occurred to me, what is the difference between the Kanye following segments versus the segments that had the greatest change? The segments that had the greatest change were 30% more likely overall to follow Kanye. But the difference here was that the median income for the dominant Kanye segments is $36,000, whereas the median income for the greatest change segments was $60,000. And for a jacket that retails at $200, it would make sense that you need to have enough income to afford a luxury item like that. So what conclusions can we draw from that? There's really 3. So digital impact, retail impact, and then ongoing impact. So the digital impact is clear. I mean, $7 million in sales in one night is proof enough to me that there's interest in this brand. But you can also look at the impact that had on the segments that follow Gap. So the top 5 segments for following Kanye are also now almost 60% more likely to follow the Gap than the average person. We show that here versus a few very comparable brands, and we see that Gap is at least gaining mental share with these segments. The retail impact here shows some promise, but it's still a little unclear. So for our 95 stores, the people that could afford Gap and follow Kanye jumped from 26% to 29% in 1 month. That's a pretty big increase, and if followed throughout a period of time, if that continued, that would be a big difference for these Gap stores. Now, even though we're only talking about 95 Gap stores, but it does show some promise, which is really kind of why we're asking the last question is, what happened after the announcement? The Financial Times ran an article at the end of January where they're just saying, is Kanye West actually good for the Gap? And I thought the author brought up some really important points. So they announced the partnership, and it took them about a year to actually release a product from the partnership. And they said that there's a few factors slowing down the schedule. One is Wes has to be the sign off on the final design, and they've actually lost some designers that he's been collaborating with. So they're wondering, 18 months into the partnership, they've only released 2 products. Can Gap actually reap the benefits from linking up with Kanye? And good news, we can track that over time. So let's look at the visitation to those Kanye segments over time to the Gap and see what happened. So here you're seeing the Kanye segment visitation by month. If you look, this is when the Kanye collaboration was announced, and you saw the Kanye segments went up to almost 30% after the announcement and hit their peak. And then a year later, they released the round jacket, and we see pretty immediately after a bump in physical visitation to those Gap stores. And then eventually later, they released the hoodie. But I mean, the glaring thing to me is you have this drop, this precipitous drop in the time in between, where it feels like we lost mind share with our Kanye following segments. So the conclusion that we see coming out of this is based on these 95 stores, which is obviously not their full set, but is the only set that were in proximity to these segments. Based on these 95 stores, I do believe that this 10-year partnership has the potential to lift their physical retail stores. But if Gap is looking to do a brand reinvention and really speak to a younger audience, they're going to be really intelligent about how they invest their money. This brings us to today. So as time would have it, 2 days ago, they finally released their big YEEZY announcement, which is a full product line where Kanye West collaborated with an Italian designer, and it goes from jeans to sweatshirts. There's plenty of clothing items. So this is what people have always been wanting. It is announced 2 days ago. So what can the Gap do to actually capture on this interest? So I'm just going to run through a few of the ways that they can activate on the PersonaLive data set. One of the complaints about segmentation data sets is, okay, now I know my segments, what do I do about it? PersonaLive data set, we've made this really easy. So for geo-marketing, we can see here the darker block groups are the block groups that have the highest amount of Kanye following segment households. And so this is a Gap here in New York. They can just deploy ads to specifically those block groups and ignore the others who do not have any Kanye following segments. They can be really smart about their ad spend here. Site selection. So this is looking at the Cincinnati area. There are 2 Gaps already in the Cincinnati area, not in proximity to Kanye following households. And the darker areas are where there are Kanye following households. 2 great opportunities for new sites. And they can even consider doing a pop-up shop here and testing that. Customer segmentation. So this gets into how the platform can extend your data that you're using in CARTO. They have a ton of e-commerce sales, and they have to deliver it with a shipping address. What they're able to do is upload their customer data and segment each of those individual sales by our segmentation. And when you do that, you get an understanding of the percentage of people that have bought from each of those individual segments from the e-commerce stores or the e-commerce sales, as well as the lifetime value of each of those customers. So did that 70% of new customers, did they just come and purchase once? Or were they consistent customers? Would they have a really good lifetime value for the Gap? So you can do that just by uploading your data. And what you get out of that, if you have customer data, is you upload that customer data and you get a dashboard. And that dashboard here is on the right-hand side. And that dashboard allows you to understand the lifetime value of each customer, if you're uploading sales data per customer, and the percentage of people that you have in each segment. You can look at your customers' visitation versus competitive brands. So here we've got Lululemon and Athleta and Nike and Adidas on here. So we can see if we're gaining market share over time with our ideal customers. And we can also look at month-by-month sales per segment. And all of that can play into our marketing strategy. And then finally, social media marketing. So you can get really, really smart about how you target and how you personalize both your email campaigns as well as your social media targeting. So let's say there's a number of different pictures that YEEZY Gap is showing of the YEEZY Gap kid line. Let's say we wanted to target females in the urban fashion segment with children that live in the home with specifically this creative. We can do that really easy on the persona segmentation. We do that by going to audiences. We hit create a new audience. We hit segments. We just said urban fashion. There was another one, the familias that followed Kanye. So we've got these two segments that we want to target. We can show filters. We want to make sure that these are females and that they have children present in the home. And what it's doing here in the audience side is calculating the records that match that criteria. We hit next. We can name this YEEZY Kids. And then we can go ahead and run that on Facebook or Instagram or throw that into our DMP DSP. And that's it. So yeah, PersonaLive enriches the data that you are already using in the workflows that you're already doing within CARTO, and also extends that and allows you to segment customers as well as deploy really personalized advertising campaigns. That was a really fun case study to do, and it was really fun to see how social media actually impacts the real world. But yeah, so thank you for everybody who stayed to the end. We're going to do some Q&A, and I just want to let you guys know that we're doing a special offer with CARTO, where we're going to be offering a 1-week trial to a login to the demo platform, and then a 10% first-year discount to webinar attendees. And then we'll also do a strategy session with you. And if you execute in the next month, I'd love to work with you on how we can make this really relevant for your business. Every business case is different. I've only shown you a few use cases here, but obviously the taxonomy is very flexible. So that's it. I would love to do some Q&A, Vanessa.
Yeah, thank you, Leighton. Very interesting case study to realize how spatial behavioral data can actually help a lot in business decisions. Here we've got couple of questions. First one says, for which countries is spatial AI data available?
This is United States. This is United States only. We started in the United States with our geosocial data set and eventually expanded, and we'll do the same thing here. So eventually we'll expand to other countries.
Good, very good. Good news then. Then we've got another question saying, hello, can you build your own segments?
Yes, yeah, that's a good question. So if you wanted to do that, you could go to the segment builder. And let's say we have like 5 different segments that over-index on following Kanye. You can just hit create a new segments, and you can combine your own segments based on whatever you're interested in.
Good, super interesting. And then there's a last question saying, how do you segment foot traffic to store?
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a good question. So if you guys are using a foot traffic data set, we use Near. We really like Near. There's also SafeGraph. The Unicast, I think, is available on the Observatory. So if you're using that foot traffic, what you need to know is the home block group or the home geography of the user. So it's usually expressed in a geo ID. And then you match that to the dominant segment of the block group that it came from. Now you can either do that on your own workflow within CARTO. We also offer an automated way of doing that. So you would go to File Upload here, and you go to Upload a new file. You have customer list, or you could upload mobile data. So we're talking about uploading mobile data. And then once that is finished running, you can download a report. I might have one here that I can show. Yeah, maybe not. But yeah, anyways, you download a report and you get a PDF that would indicate the segments that are visiting your location. You also get an Excel file.
Good, very good. So I think that's all. Thank you very much for joining us today. You'll receive an email with a link to the webinar so you can revisit it in case you missed something. We hope this was useful, and we are looking forward to hearing from you soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.